Hi there, I trust that you're all doing so well. It's such a privilege for us to be sharing with you today with regards to this all important topic, how to really love your spouse through communication. The essence of communication is getting the message across. And I believe that a lot of people don't have a problem with communication, their problem is clarity. Clarity. A lot of us lack clarity. There's a guy called Howard Hendricks, Dr. Howard Hendricks, and he once taught that the secret to concentration is elimination. So eliminate the fluff. All right. And because communication is really quite a broad topic, the way my wife and I are going to deal with this, we're going to focus on communication during intense fellowship. We don't like to say, hey, we argue, hey, we fight. We prefer to call it intense fellowship. You know what I'm talking about, right? We've been through a lot, haven't we? There's been the whole COVID pandemic that has struck the world. In South Africa, there's been unrest, there have been riots and that kind of thing. People are learning to work from home together. Some people call it living at work as opposed to working from home. I remember counseling a particular couple, and in fact, it was an individual I was counseling, and they actually said to me, you know what, Paul, I've been married for 20 something years, and this is the longest period I've had just with my husband, because we're working. He's in that corner, I'm in my corner. It's not like before where we would go off to our different jobs. And she said that it's really tough. In fact, her theory was that it shouldn't be till death do us part, but it should be till death or pandemic do us part. And so we're seeing marriages being affected right now. And we want to share with you and give you some powerful tools that can help you during these times in terms of communication. So my wife is going to kick off, and she's going to share with you some powerful foundations and rules of engagement and guidelines around communication, especially during conflict. She's going to talk to you about the power of love and respect as a biblical foundation for communication. Enjoy.
Okay, well, I'm going to be talking to you about intense fellowship in your marriage. And if you have been together for any length of time, married for any length of time, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you do not have intense fellowship, aka fighting, then sure, I'm not sure. Maybe your relationship isn't healthy, because we all have intense fellowship and we work through things. We're two different people. It's completely normal to have intense fellowship. So I'm just going to give us and talk around a few pointers to help us have healthy outcomes when we do fight, when we do have some intense fellowship. And you know what? When we have disagreements and we have to work through things where we have differing opinions as a couple, it's actually a healthy thing in terms of, if we deal with it in the correct manner and we deal with it in a healthy manner, it can actually end up bringing us to a greater place of intimacy, a greater place of understanding one another, and it can actually bring us closer together afterwards. So it's not a negative thing. If we deal with it in the right manner, it can actually be a very healthy process to bringing us together, to grow more together, to grow more intimate with each other, and to have a better understanding of each other. So I want you to close your eyes. Close your eyes right now and picture the Olympics, okay? We know the Olympics is happening right now. And in front of you, you have got the heavyweight boxing happening in front of you. Now, as you can see, there's intense physical engagement happening in the ring. And you can open your eyes again. So that's what you're looking at. There's intense physical engagement happening in the ring. What are some of the things that you can tell me about these two fighters and their fight right now? You'll be able to know at the outset a few things immediately, even if you don't even know who the fighters are. First of all, you'll know that where it's happening. You'll know, if you're sitting there, you'll know that their boundaries in terms of where the fight takes place. It's within that particular square or rectangle, I don't know what it is, but it's within that fighting ring. Immediately you'll know where it happens, you'll know when it happens. There's specific times. It starts at this time, it ends at this time. Each round is a specific amount of time, so it's There are boundaries in terms of where it happens, in terms of when it happens. And in terms of what, there's a referee to call either of the boxes to account should one of them foul. So there's a referee inside that ring to say what is not allowed and what is allowed. And related to that, there's a how. There's rules of engagement. There are places where the boxers can't box. They can't hit below the belt. There are all sorts of other rules that govern how these two boxers can fight, and fight in such a way that they can win. And who is the winner? There's an obvious winner at the end of the boxing fight. So there's where, when, what, how, and who for this particular boxing fight. And in the same way, I'm drawing an analogy, in the same way when we come together in our relationship with our spouse, and there's some type of intense fellowship, we can apply similar sort of boundaries to help us to fight in a way that there's a win. At the end of the day, there's a winner, and the winner will be both of us. The winner will be our relationship. The winner will be us drawing together, having greater understanding, growing more intimate together as a couple at the end of it. And there's no point having intense fellowship, having a fight as a couple and wanting to win, because I can win the battle and lose the war. The war here is it's a war for our relationship, for our marriage. It's a war for us to last, to walk the whole road of marriage all these years and to enjoy it and to grow closer together. That is the real war. And there's no point me winning this one little battle tonight and then I lose the war tomorrow. There's no point in that. So the win in all of this, it must be a win-win. It must be both of us in our relationship drawing closer together and having greater understanding. That is the win. So I'll stop there in terms of the analogy. But in order for the intense fellowship to be productive in the end and to not be destructive, we have to put in place intentional boundaries. We have to put in place intentional rules of engagement to help us to get there, because when emotions are high, I'm sure you'll agree with me, when emotions are high, when tempers are flaring, when there's voices that are raised, when we feel misunderstood, it's very difficult at that point to begin to say, okay, we can't fight like this, we can't fight like this, these are our rules of engagement, we can't do it. Then we have to set them in place before and be very intentional about it, so that our conflict is at least productive at the end of the day. So using my analogy that I just, or using our analogy that we were just imagining, the first thing is where do we need, so these are things that we need to decide beforehand. Where will our intense fellowship happen and where will it not happen? For example, will it happen in the kitchen, in front of the kids, in front of our helper? Can it happen in public, in a mall? Where will it not happen? Where will it happen? Will it happen somewhere rather where it's private, where it's just between us two, where the kids are not going to, they're not going to witness it, where they're not going to see mom and dad raising their voices, they're not going to see mom and dad fighting, and then it creates a bit of insecurity in our kids, so where will it happen? Where will it not happen? This is something that my husband and I need to decide beforehand. It's not going to happen in front of the kids. It's not going to happen in the car, on the way to church, in the car anyway. It's not going to happen in a public venue where people are going to witness it. It's going to happen in the privacy of the four walls of our bedroom, where we can deal with it and come to a resolution in a wise manner. So we have to pre-decide where is it going to happen, okay? We also have to decide, and the other thing is not over the phone, okay? So is it going to happen over the phone? Probably not a good idea, okay? Where is it? When is it going to happen? We need to pre-decide, just like that boxing match that I was talking about, just like that boxing match you were imagining. We have to pre-decide when it will happen and when it won't happen. And we need to stick to this. So, for instance, my hubby and I like to have, you say, well, do you have intense fellowship? Yes, we have intense fellowship, okay? We've decided that as far as possible, we will try to resolve our conflict before we go to sleep. We don't want to let the sun go down on our anger. So we pre-decided that we want to try to stick to this as far as possible. And, sometimes maybe it's 2 a.m. in the morning, you're really tired, you just need to go to sleep. The tiredness is feeding into the conflict. It's really not happening, really not helping. And so you decide, you know what, we'll sleep on it. But when we wake up tomorrow morning, we're going to resolve it before you go off to here, or before then, or we're going to resolve it before we sleep tomorrow night. And then we set a time where we know we're both going to be in the same place so that we can actually talk through everything and resolve it. So when is it going to happen? It will be resolved before we sleep tomorrow night. It will be resolved before the week is out. We will never take more than X days to resolve an issue. So you don't get to a situation where you have a fight, it's 2 a.m., you're tired, you go to sleep, you wake up the next day, and then it's busy, and then it's life as normal, and we get 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and you never deal with that particular issue, but it's just brewing. It's been swept under the carpet, and it's brewing, and it's getting ready to pop up at another point, and this time it's going to have a bit of salt, a bit of pepper, a bit of chili sauce, and it's going to be bigger and a bit worse than it was. So, for instance, another one is we will never stay apart for extended periods before we've resolved something. And obviously, I'm talking about, this is not a situation where a couple is now separated. That is their situation. But I'm saying a healthy marriage where you've had a conflict, the husband maybe works, out of town, then you say, we will never separate and stay apart in that situation where he goes out of town for the week for work until we've resolved this issue. Because then, he can end up being tempted, she can end up being tempted, and all sorts of things can happen in the interim. So when that's really important. Another thing is to agree on certain things, like we are pastors, so to agree that if my husband is about to preach, or I'm about to preach or minister, we will never do it then, because that is completely counterproductive. It doesn't help anything. If there's something, I can bite my tongue. If I've got something that I'm wanting to talk about, bite my tongue until we've finished, my husband has finished ministering, and then we actually work through it and have our intense fellowship. So it's about being thoughtful. It's about being considerate of the other person. Are they about to go to work and do a big presentation? You know what? I'm not going to die. I don't have to launch into him right now. Let him go. Let him do that. And then when he comes home, we'll agree to discuss X, Y, and Z. And then it will be productive. Otherwise, he's trying to think, or I'm trying to think, I'm doing this now. How am I going to do that? And now my spouse is wanting to bring up this. It's unfair. So pre-deciding, there's certain times where we're not going to do it. Because we love each other, because we want the best for each other. And so pre-deciding those types of things and talking them through beforehand is actually quite important. The next thing is what? What will your plumb line be? Who will that referee be? What will be your standard? What will your referee be in terms of the third person in the mix? When you're in the ring, there's a physical referee standing there. When I'm having intense fellowship with my husband, there's no referee. Yes, there's the Holy Spirit, but we can't say, or there's the Lord, but for many people, the fear of the Lord flies out the window when the anger comes in, okay? So we have to have a plumb line. We have to have a standard. What is that standard that is non-negotiable for both parties? And we must agree on it before we hit that intense fellowship, okay? So for my husband and I, we have the Word of God. The Word of God is the ultimate authority in our marriage. It's the ultimate authority in every aspect of our marriage. And when we come to loggerheads, that's the third strand that we turn to. We say, well, what does God say in His Word? We turn to the Word. It guides how we speak to each other. It guides what we say to each other. It reminds us what the goal of intense fellowship should be. It's the ultimate standard for everything from what we're fighting about and deciding upon, and to even how we fight. So if he can be speaking to me, or I can be speaking to him in a manner, we can say, put our hand up and say, you know what, you are not speaking to me in a way, or say if I'm speaking to him, he can say, you're not respecting me the way that you're speaking to me. I feel disrespected. And I know that as a wife, in the Bible, I'm supposed to respect my husband. I want to communicate respect. If he's speaking to me in a certain way that leaves me feeling very unloved, I can appeal to him and say, you know what, my love, I actually don't feel loved by the way you're speaking to me. You're raising your voice. You're speaking to me in a tone that leaves me feeling very unloved. Can we just bring that back into the center of our intense fellowship, So how we speak to each other is important. It has to be in line with the word. And that brings me to my next point, which is the how. How. Sometimes, there are genuine differences. There are high emotions run really high, and it becomes difficult to keep these certain emotions and things under check in terms of how we speak. So we can raise our voice. Sometimes in our intense fellowships, one of us might say to the other, you're raising your voice, and then the other one will say, I'm not raising my voice, I'm just feeling passionate. Okay, but we need to think through how we're going to fight, because the end goal is not to win. The end goal is not to vent. Okay? The end goal is actually reconciliation, greater understanding, greater intimacy. So how do we fight? How do we fight fairly? And it's important that we agree upon these things. For instance, these are some of the hows that you can think through, that you can agree upon beforehand, these rules of engagement. So how? Well, we're not going to raise our voices at each other. And if I agree upon that with my husband before, then if he raises his voice or if I raise my voice, we can say, I remember that rule of engagement. We said we weren't going to do this and you're doing it right now. Can you please just bring your decibels down a little bit? Okay. That's one. Another thing, no bringing up of other issues that cloud the issue at hand. We focus on one issue at a time. This is really key. Even for us, we've found, sometimes issues can be sort of related, or there can be an issue at hand that pushes a button in us that reminds us of something else that's sort of related, and we bring it up and we throw it in, it spices things up, it gives us more ammo. But we have to agree beforehand, no bringing up of other issues that cloud the issue at hand. We deal with one issue at a time, and that helps us to work through. So we work through one issue, there's understanding that comes on that one issue, we come to agreement, we resolve that one issue. Then if there are other issues, we can deal with them at a later time, okay? Maybe for some of you, you need to include this one, no violence. Okay, whether it's towards yourself, towards your spouse, or whether it's with other things in the room. No violence, that's another important one. No slamming of the door, no walking out in the middle of an intense fellowship unless the emotions are so high that you agree upon it. So these are things that you must agree beforehand. There's going to be no walking out. Now, sometimes you get to a point where you actually need a time out. So you can agree upon it in that moment to say there's going to be no walking out in the middle of a discussion unless we agree upon it together. And sometimes, maybe if some of you are like me, sometimes you really just need to go out and go for a run or something. Just go out and clear your head and come back and re-engage. But whenever we agree to do that type of thing, it's like, okay, we're going to take a time out until, and there's a deadline, or until you've done this, and there's a deadline, so that you're assured that you're going to come back and you're going to resolve the issue. You're not going to bury it or try and sweep it under the carpet. Maybe for some of you, you need to include this: no foul or abusive language. Okay, that's another rule of engagement. Maybe for some people they need that. And if you need to define it, then do. When you say this, that for me is abusive. When you say that, when you use that word, that for me is foul language, and we're not going to allow that in our time of intense fellowship. No bringing up of past issues. Okay, deal with other unresolved issues separately. I touched on that just now. That's another important one. So you can think through the things that you need to set in place in terms of how you fight, so that you fight fairly, that you fight within your boundaries that are healthy. And someone once said that understanding is to communication what oxygen is to breathing. Fighting fairly and fighting to bring about a positive outcome is all about communicating and understanding each other. And this is how we grow as a couple. This is what makes intense fellowship valuable, the growing and understanding of one another. Even if you come to a point of agreeing to disagree, but at least grow in understanding. So it's important that if you're the type of person that tends to listen to answer, so you're listening and you're already thinking about what you're going to say before the other person has finished what they're saying, or you're listening and before your spouse has already finished what they're saying, you already interrupt them because you think you know what they're going to be saying. It's important if either of you fall into this category, that you come up with a solution for this, and an answer. Something that you can do is to come up with a rule like, we will listen to each other for a full 5 minutes before we're allowed to respond. So my spouse is allowed to speak for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 3 minutes or however it is. Maybe for you it's 1 minute. Okay, maybe you like to interrupt. Maybe I will allow my spouse to speak for 1 minute or 5 minutes before I'm allowed to come in and say anything. Or maybe it's this: my spouse will finish what they're saying, one point, because sometimes we can feel like we're swimming in words when there are 55 points that are brought up, okay? So there's 1 point, they're allowed to finish that, and when they finish that, before I can respond, I need to communicate back to them what they've just communicated to me. Because in order to communicate back to them what they've communicated to me, I have to listen, but I have to communicate understanding of what they've said. And my spouse will feel more understood if I communicate back to them what I think that they've said. And they have to agree, yes, that is what I was saying. And when they feel understood, then I can proceed with my point. And then they must do the same with me. They must give me the same allotted time. And they must also communicate back to me what they've understood I have said to my satisfaction. And I know it sounds quite laborious and tedious, but when emotions are running high, sometimes you just need to say, okay, we need to put that one into use right now. Please, I feel misunderstood. You're not understanding. You're not listening. Can we just use that now? And can you communicate back to me what you think I've said, so I know you've really heard me and I feel understood? And that's really important in intense fellowship, understanding and communicating understanding. And this will often communicate respect to a husband and love for a wife. And that is what, at the end of the day, we're crying out for. The husband is crying out very often to be respected, and the wife is crying out very often to feel loved. And there's actually a really great book called Love and Respect, and I would encourage you to get a hold of it, by Dr. Emerson Eggerichs. You'll see it on Kindle, whatever, and it goes very deeply into that, but very powerful principle about love and respect. Okay, so lastly, and I've touched on this all through this brief chat that we've had. Who wins? When we're looking at that boxing ring, there's a clear winner at the end of it. Most of the time, there's a winner. And when we're having intense fellowship, yes, we might feel like we want to win, but like I said before, it's really not worth it to win the battle and to lose the war. And we have to remember that the war is for our relationship. It's not about the immediate fight. It might feel like it's about this, but at this fight. But at the back of our minds, we have to remember the real win from a fight, the real win from intense fellowship, is that we grow in understanding of each other. We grow in intimacy with each other, and that we fight within the rules we have created. We have intense fellowship within those rules we've created. And if we do so, then even intense fellowship, even fighting, can become a big win for our relationship. So I hope that somewhere within there you've gleaned something that you can apply from tonight, you can put in place. I want to encourage you, if you have not drawn up your own rules of engagement, that you go ahead and you do that. Thanks for listening.
Okay, great. Wasn't that powerful? I think it's so important for you as a couple to develop your own rules of engagement. And just remember, perfect practice results in perfection, doesn't it? Okay, but we have to practice perfectly in order to get to a place of mastery. I actually don't usually like talking about perfection. I prefer talking about mastery. And mastery is where you are growing, right? You're becoming better. I'm not the father I want to be, but I'm certainly not the father I was. Okay, when we talk about guilt-free motherhood, don't try to be the perfect mother. Rather say to yourself, am I a growing mother? Because if you're trying to be the perfect spouse or perfect mother or perfect father, you'll always be feeling guilty, won't you? Because none of us is perfect. All right, I want to focus now on something that's so important in the context of marriage. And that's giving and receiving of feedback. That's what we're going to dig deeper into at this particular point. And I believe that if you master the art of giving your spouse feedback and also receiving feedback, you will actually grow. You'll grow as individuals and you'll grow as a couple. It's going to be very practical, and I'm going to give you some models. I've got about 5 different models I want to share with you in terms of giving feedback. And then I also want to share with you a model that you can use in terms of how to process or land feedback when you're on the receiving end. Are you ready? All right. I like what was said by John Wooden, great coach. He says a coach is someone who can give correction without causing resentment. And that's what we aim to do, isn't it? We will see certain things in our spouse that we don't like, or where they are not sure of or know of the impact of their behavior on us. It might not be something wrong they're doing, but it's impacting us, and they need our feedback. The reason why a lot of people resist feedback and react to feedback and have feedback triggering them into other behavior is partly because of how the feedback is given. It's given as a judgment, not actually as feedback. And I want to give you some tools today that can help you when it comes to this. Now, in terms of effective feedback, for feedback to be truly effective, you need to be making information useful to others. Have you ever been in a situation where you're at work and you're supposed to have a feedback session with your boss, and you spend 45 minutes having this discussion? You come out and you're more confused. You don't quite know, like, what is that all about? There are times when I've spoken to my wife and I'll share something with her, and then she'll say, my love, what was the point? Can you just tell me the point? Then I get defensive and I'm like, everything was the point. It was all important. And I have to learn, because of her personality, I need to speak in bullet point. Okay. And sometimes she'll say to me, it's frustrating because sometimes when we're fighting, it's like you're talking in circles, because I become more verbose. You're talking in circles and I feel like I'm swimming in words. So make sure when you're giving feedback to your spouse that the information is actually useful to them. Very important. When feedback is effective, you'll find that it allows you to replicate and improve your performance. Again, this is so important. If I just say to you, great meal, now that's wonderful, but it's actually a bit of a judgment. If I just say, great coffee, well, what was great about it? What did you like about it? Now, it's fine to call that a compliment, but it's not actually feedback. Remember, when you want to give effective feedback, clarity is crucial, all right? So it allows you to replicate and improve the performance. So if I give a presentation and my wife says, my love, I really love the way when you spoke, you backed up everything you said with a verse, or you backed up everything you said with research, right? I know I can replicate that. Oh, next time I must do more of that. She appreciated it, all right? So it needs to be very behavioral and very specific. It's developmental in nature. Whenever you're giving your spouse feedback, make sure that the goal is to grow the other person, to develop the other person. That should be the fruit. That should be the fruit. As opposed to a situation where it's to shame the individual, to embarrass the individual. We call them snipers. Those people who wait until you're in a public setting. They had a nice one-on-one with you earlier on, but they wait for you to get into a public setting. And when you're in that public setting, that's when they say something to embarrass you. So it needs to be developmental in nature. The person should come out of that time with you feeling like, you know what, I'm going to grow. I'm going to become better. And this person is for me. They're not actually against me. It also needs to be direct. And this is so, so important. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Okay? Sometimes we flour things up. Sometimes we add the tomato sauce, the ketchup, the peri-peri sauce, whatever it is. Okay? The pepper. No, just be direct. Just be direct. And sometimes we think to ourselves, directness is rudeness. But it shouldn't be in the context of a marriage. Okay? Your spouse shouldn't be guessing what you were really saying. And I know some people come from backgrounds where things were never said directly. So they're always looking out for the innuendos. Was that a bit of a dig? Where is that coming from? You find that confrontation, the impact of confrontation is far less severe than the impact of concealment. When it comes to communication, if you're always concealing things, it ends up spreading like liquid mercury, all right? It becomes messy because it turns into gossip. Now you hear the kids saying something and you're wondering, is that what my spouse thinks of me? Right? It needs to be direct to the person who you're speaking to. Very important. It needs to be behaviorally anchored. So you're strong on the behavior, not on the person. Right? So each time you give me feedback, it needs to be on what I actually did as opposed to who I am. You know, sometimes people will say to their spouses things like, you don't care about me. But that's not behaviorally anchored. What is the behavior that led you to believe that they don't care about you? If you say you don't care about me, that's a judgment. And we'll have a big argument because I'll start saying, hey, but I did this for you and I did that for you. How can you say I don't care about you? But if you say, when I sent you my WhatsApp talking about how troubled I am today because I'm not feeling well, you didn't respond all afternoon, even though I saw in some of the WhatsApp groups that we're both on, you were responding to their things. That's pure action. It's pure behavior. It's not a judgment. I didn't say you're lazy. I didn't say you are irresponsible. I didn't say you don't care about me. I'm just talking about your behavior. Very powerful. And then you can't argue with that. Okay? So it's non-evaluative. In other words, it's non-judgmental. And I believe that one of the things that needs to be restored to marriages today is non-evaluative curiosity, where we're extremely curious about our spouses, extremely curious, and we ask questions, not as an interrogation, but stemming from that genuine curiosity. I want to give you some guidelines for giving feedback. Feedback needs to be actionable. So the advice should be practical, it should be realistic, and should be something that can be used. Feedback needs to be blame-free, and this is so important. So often when spouses give feedback to each other, there's a lot of accusation. It was your fault. You're tough on issues, not on people. Even when we talk about teamwork and team dynamics, because the couple is a team, you know, one of the marks of great teams in business, in church, is basically unfiltered conflict around ideas. You can debate things, you can engage in dialogue, but the result of it is not that you hate each other afterwards. Nothing is personal, okay? You're debating the issue. So you're tough on issues, not on people. Very important. The third thing is it needs to be calm. You know, generally the manner should be cool and not full of too much emotion. And I'm not talking about emotional self-awareness. Everyone should be emotionally self-aware, where you've got a sense of, you know what, I felt embarrassed when you spoke like that. I felt belittled when you said that. That's emotional self-awareness, and that's part of your emotional intelligence. Okay? So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about emotionalism, when people become drama queens, when people exaggerate everything they say. All right? We need to be careful about that. So try to remain calm when you're giving feedback, okay? Because the message is lost when you become overly emotional, right? The fourth is dispassionate, okay? Feedback needs to be dispassionate. It needs to focus on facts, and you need to be as objective as possible. And when you can't be objective, you can just say, this is how I feel when such and such happens, as opposed to, you make me angry, you make me mad. No one makes you anything. Rather say, when you behave in such and such a manner, the result, based on my interpretation of it, based on my view of the world, is I end up doing such and such. All right? No one makes you do anything. The fifth thing I want to share in terms of some guidelines around feedback is it needs to be enlightening. Don't tell people what they already know. Sometimes people have got this thing where they tell you something, but it's something you can't do anything about. And this is so important, right? To understand. It needs to be enlightening. It needs to be something you can do something about, all right? As opposed to someone just telling you the obvious. It needs to be future orientated, okay? Focus on the future, not on the past, to produce change. What tends to happen with a lot of feedback is we dwell on the past, we accuse each other, and we go round and round in circles describing what happened or didn't happen. And then it's he said, she said. For feedback to be effective, we need to say, this happened, yes, but what's the way forward? So we want to try to quite quickly get to what's the way forward as a result of what we've been through, okay? The seventh thing I want to share with you is try to be generous in general in how you give feedback, all right? Try to give more positive feedback than negative feedback. And that's why we say for every cold prickly that you give your spouse, they should also have 8 warm fuzzies. Now, I'm not saying this happens in one conversation. So if I'm about to give feedback that is negative to my wife, I don't go up to her and say, oh, your hair is looking great. Oh, I love how you've done your makeup. Oh, nice blouse. And then come up with 8 things. And I say, but this is what I want to say. Because she won't take me seriously concerning all those other things. She'll just think, oh, what you really wanted to say was this. And then you are scrambling around looking for positive things to say, right? So what we're saying is the nature of the relationship must be characterized 8-to-1. 8 warm fuzzies for every cold prickly. That's just the way marriage works. In fact, it's actually been found that if someone says 50% of the time we're fighting and we're unhappy, and the other 50% of the time we are happy, overall, the way you feel about your marriage will be sad, not happy, okay? It needs to be at least 5-to-1 in terms of positive experiences you have in your marriage versus negative experiences. And it's possible to actually create conversations that are positive, create experiences in marriage that are positive. This is very, very important. And that's why some of you who've been struggling in your marriages, it's partly because you're feeling, can I ever do anything right? My spouse seems to always be criticizing me. And yet if I sit down with your spouse and I say, can you come up with 10 things you appreciate about her or about him? They will come up with those things. It's just that they don't tell you, right? So it's important to be proactively giving positive feedback, not just negative feedback. So the first model I want to share with you with regards to giving feedback, it's called the D4 feedback model. And this is a very powerful model. I got to meet the guy who invented it. He said, Paul, it's so powerful. It's being used in places like the White House or the Pentagon, one of those places. Extremely powerful. Have you ever been in a situation where you go to someone and you say, why didn't you respond to my email? I don't like it when you don't respond to my email, right? And then the person says, I did respond. Go and check. And you go and you check and you see that they actually responded, but your server was down. That's why you didn't see it. Okay? Then you have to eat humble pie and you go to them and you say, sorry, I did actually see. You did send it. You did respond. Okay? And that's because you didn't use the D4 feedback model. Because the way the D4 feedback model works is the first thing you do is you establish the facts. Hey, I just want to find out, did you manage to respond to my email? Because I haven't seen anything yet. Okay, so you're not accusing them. You're not saying you didn't respond. Okay, I haven't seen anything yet, which is the truth. Then the person might say, you know what, Paul, I've told you I'm so busy. I haven't got time for your emails. So you've now established the facts, right? That they received your email, but they didn't respond timeously. Then you go to the first D, which is basically, it's what we call data. And factual people really like this. And this is where you basically say, when you don't respond timeously to my emails, okay? Then you go to D2, which is the depth of feeling. It's an emotion. Some of you might have seen my emotional wheel, and you can even Google it, and you'll find different emotional wheels and so on. It just gives you vocab, right, for emotions. How did you feel? I felt belittled. I felt isolated. I actually felt quite rejected. I felt dismissed, all right? It's the emotion you're feeling. And then the dramatic interpretation, What's the meaning you're attaching to that behavior, to that whole experience? Because it says to me, am I really important to you? Is my job less important than your job? Am I a priority in your life? I'm asking myself these questions. Can you see it's not the emotion anymore, but the interpretation of it? Okay? And then the final stage is what you would like them to do. From now onwards, can we have a thing in our marriage where we respond to each other's emails within 12 hours of having received the email? Again, very powerful. Okay? So what happens with this is, depending on the personality of the individual, if they're fiery red, the kind of person whose mindset is let's do it now, you want to move very quickly to that red stage. Otherwise, they can feel like this person is floating around in the emotion. I just need to know, what should I do? Okay? So my wife is quite a fiery red, and what happens when we communicate with each other, I might be saying to her, see, my love, I think it's about shared values because we need to be on the same page. And she might just say, what do you want me to do? So what should I do? What should I do? So you still do it in that same order, D1, D2, D3, D4. But based on who you are talking to, you would dwell a bit longer in that particular quadrant. Okay? Remember, your cool blues are your let's do it correctly people. Your fiery red are your let's do it now people. And your sunshine yellows are let's do it together, everyone, people. And then your earth greens are your let's do it nicely people. All right? Now, you can also use D4 positively, right? When you're trying to get someone to do something. For example, you could say, honey, do you remember 2 weeks ago when you gave that wonderful presentation in the marketing exercise that you're doing and you managed to secure that business? Yes, yes, yes. I must say, when you did that, I felt so proud. In fact, I felt really relieved. Dramatic interpretation, because it says to me that I'm not the only one pulling weight in this family business, but you're starting to take ownership, right? That's the interpretation. And then from now onwards, this is the do. From now onwards, I'd like you to be the one who targets those types of clients, please. Can you see the power of that? There's emotional honesty. You see, typically your fiery reds will just go straight to D4. Can you now deal with those particular clients? And then the person on the receiving end is like, you guys are just abusing me because you know I'm reliable. But when you take them through D4, you're communicating very clearly and you're giving feedback. And you know what? The person is motivated because they see a link between their behavior, D1, and the emotional impact it had on their spouse or whomever is giving them the actual feedback. Okay? Let me give you another domestic situation where you can use D4. Let's say your spouse has been coming home late. If you're a typical fiery red, you will just go straight to the do. I need you to tell me when you're running late. Okay? I need you to tell me when you're running late. You just go straight there. And then your spouse begins to react because they're feeling like, do you actually care about the way I'm working so hard for this family? Do you appreciate my hard work? That's how they will feel, right? And you begin to fight. But if you do D4, you start off by establishing the facts. Honey, what time did you come back home last night? And he might say, well, you know what? I actually came back the usual time, but the bedroom door was already closed. So I didn't want to disturb you because I thought you were sleeping. So I was actually in the study working on that dream holiday you've always wanted to go on. Okay, hopefully he's telling the truth. Then you're really happy that you used D4. You didn't pile into him, but you were actually establishing the facts first. All right? Now, what if he says to you something which hopefully he doesn't say, but what if he says this to you? Oh yeah, I came back, quite late. Then you say, oh, because I didn't get a text message. I didn't get a WhatsApp. I didn't see a WhatsApp. So you don't accuse. You don't say, you didn't send a WhatsApp. I didn't see any WhatsApps. Oh, I didn't think it was necessary, because I thought you're used to it, that I'm coming home late nowadays. Okay? So you've now established the facts. Then you say, honey, when you are running late, but you don't inform me, that's the fact. Okay? I feel really anxious. Okay? Dramatic interpretation. Because I'm wondering whether you've been involved in an accident or not. And I'm also thinking to myself, are the children only my responsibility? From now onwards, can we have a thing where the moment you realize that you're running late, you inform me? And that's how it works. One guy I was teaching this, it was a particular group of people in one of the banks, and I remember he said, no, I've heard of D4 before, but I don't think it should be D4, it should just be D2. We just go straight from the blue to the red, you know? And I said, so what do you do with your wife at home? How would you give her feedback? He said, no, with her it's D8, because we just keep going round and round, okay? And I know sometimes it gets like that, but you know, with these models, it's so important when you teach each other the model, and both of you are aware of the model, and you contract with each other. From now onwards, when we give each other feedback, we must use D4. Most of the models that I teach on, my wife is aware of them, and they can backfire on me. There was a time when I was trying to give her some feedback, or I said something to her, and she said to me, my love, I think you should have used D4 there because you didn't establish the facts first, all right? So it brings about an accountability when you can use these models. The next one I want to share with you is called the SAID approach. And it starts like this. It's situation, okay? So you describe the situation or the context, action, impact, and then the desired outcome. It's easy to remember because it's SAID, right? So let's say you and your spouse are in a drama group together. Maybe it's a church drama group, right? And you're in a situation where you've noticed that she's been pitching up late and you want to give her feedback with regards to it. Now, if you go up to her and just say, honey, I'm a bit concerned about your commitment to this drama team. I'm heading it up, and I've noticed ever since I started heading it up, you just pitch up late and do your own thing. I'm concerned about your commitment levels. You don't seem that committed anymore. Is that feedback? It's not feedback. It's a judgment, because you're going to start having fights about her commitment levels, right? Because she's going to say, but I actually purchased those chairs with my own money, you know, the chairs that you guys use in the drama group. So what are you talking about commitment? My middle name is committed, right? So it becomes a problem. But if you use the principles of giving feedback that I'm going to share with you, again, very powerful. You start off with the situation, which is the context. Honey, do you remember 3 weeks ago at the AGM, we all agreed that from now onwards, drama practice is going to move from 4 p.m. to 3 p.m. In fact, I think it was your idea. Do you remember that? That's what we agreed. Yes, yes, yes. So that's the context, is the situation, right? Action or behavior. I've observed that for the last 3 rehearsals that we've had, you've arrived after 3:30. Now, there's no judgment there. I didn't say you're not committed. I didn't say you're stupid, you're lazy, you're disrespectful. I'm just stating that your action. And I'm giving you feedback based on your action, right? So what happens in this situation is, if you want to know if something is an action or a behavior, you have to ask yourself, can a camera record it? Okay? Is it something I can hear or something I can see? So if there's CCTV camera there, it will show the person walking in, your spouse walking in, 3:33, 3:34, 3:32. Okay? So you know it's an action. And then the I is impact. Impact. So impact number 1. The impact this has on me, my love, is that I feel really stressed out, especially during the first act, because I rely on you heavily for that. Impact number 2, I'm also a bit concerned about the younger actresses that look up to you, that they might also start coming late. Impact number 3, I'm also a bit concerned about how this is going to affect your brand, because people respect you and now they're just seeing you pitching up late. Okay? So impact can be at multiple levels. Remember, with insights, what I showed you earlier on, the previous one, the D4 feedback model, that was just talking about the emotional impact. This one now speaks of emotional impact, if you want to include that, but also impact on your brand, impact on other people. And then the D is desired outcome. From now onwards, can we have a thing where we meet 10 minutes early before the practice so that we can do a dry run? Okay? And that's quite important. Now, the desired outcome can be a conversation. Each time I talk about the do, it can actually be a conversation. So what do you think we need to do about this? We need to come up with something. And then you would say that. So the SAID approach, very, very powerful. And again, when it comes to giving positive feedback, you can also use this. Okay? Do you remember 3 weeks ago when you gave that presentation to that difficult client, right? Action. During your talk, I noticed that you backed everything you said with statistics, and you also asked me if I've had anything to add or subtract. Okay, impact. I must say I felt really included, and I'm looking forward to being part of your team. Desired outcome. Please continue doing this. We'll work well together. Okay, that's just an example. So the said approach, very powerful. Okay. Another model that I really like, and I'll share with you why I like it, is called clean talk. It's called clean talk. Now, you start off with the data. When I hear you say you can't go out to dinner with me tonight because you're too busy with work, okay, that's the data. Then the emotion, I feel sad. Then the judgment or interpretation. It seems to me that we haven't spent much time together the last 2 weeks, and I'm sensing some distance between us. And then what's nice about clean talk is there's a pause and check. Like, hey, let me check in with you. Is that assessment correct? Right? And then you end off with the want, which is similar to desired outcome. Okay, the want. I want to be close to you. And then there's an optional second level want, because I love you. Now, it's very difficult to become defensive over this, especially when they mention the want, isn't it? Because they're making themselves vulnerable, and there's a connection that ends up being there. So clean talk is a powerful one to use, and it gives an opportunity for a pause and a check-in with your spouse, okay, when you give them feedback. So it's data, what they actually did, the action, the emotion, okay, emotional impact, and you can build on that. You might not just say, I feel sad. You might say, I feel neglected. I feel lonely. I feel so alone, all right? And then judgment or interpretation. So it's not judgment in the negative sense of the word. It's how I judge the situation or how I'm interpreting it, okay? Then you pause and check, and then you talk about your wants, what you would like. You express your needs. And this is very important because many people protest instead of communicating their needs, all right? They protest. You know, sometimes what tends to happen in conversations is you become very critical towards your spouse. You keep coming late. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And you start saying that, wait a minute, there's something actually bothering me here. What's my real need? Oh, honey, I'm really missing you. Honey, I just need some couch time with you. That's my desire. Honey, I'm missing you so much. I just want to dream together like we used to. Not talking about the admin or about the kids, just us dreaming about our future together. That's what I'm longing for. Let me tell you something. A guy will want to, step into that situation, right? A guy will, see, every man needs a beauty to rescue. That's what I often say to the ladies when I'm counseling. Every man needs a beauty to rescue, but you have to be rescuable, all right? And I remember saying this, and one lady said, nah, but Paul, the thing is, we only start getting to that protesting stage because you men, you don't listen. That's the problem. You don't listen, okay? And there's a lot of truth to that. Then there's what's called non-violent communication. Non-violent communication, again, a powerful model because it brings up the issue of needs. So you start off with an observation. When you say you can't go out to dinner with me tonight because you're too busy with work, what's the feeling? I feel sad. I feel neglected. I feel hurt, okay? And then this is the need. Because I have a need for connection with you. That's why I'm feeling this. You see, it's not because you're a bad person. It's not because you hurt me. It's because of this need. If I didn't have a need to be connected with you, I'll be like, carry on working. We don't have to go anywhere, right? So it gets you to acknowledge your needs. It's such a powerful one in the context of marriage, NVC, non-violent communication, right? Then you make a request. Would you be willing to work tomorrow night instead? So it forces you to be quite assertive around your needs, to actually say, but wait a minute, this is my husband or this is my wife. Let me make this request. Many of us, we don't make these requests because we're rejecting ourselves before we can be rejected. You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. And then the final one I want to share with you, it's very similar to the said one that I shared a bit earlier on, and it's called SBI. It was developed by the Center for Creative Leadership, okay? And I like to teach this a lot, all right? You start off with the situation, right? The specific event or the circumstances. And then there's the behavior, right? And the behavior could be observable actions, verbal comments that were made, non-verbal behaviors and signals, right? Mannerisms. When you do that, when you act like this, okay? Whatever the case may be. And then the impact, okay? What I or others think, feel, or do as a result. I said, I heard, I felt, I thought, okay? It's not an interpretation and it's not a judgment, it's just the impact. And sometimes the way I teach this is I call it SBI squared, because you can have SBII, right? And the second I is improvement, where you talk about, hey, I'd like you to improve in this way, or I think we can improve as a couple by doing the following things. Very powerful when you put these into practice. So now I've given you these models. You can actually be crafting feedback. You can actually have a date where you literally just spend time, you share maybe 3 SBIs or 3 SEDs or 3 NVCs to your spouse, with your spouse, and they share 3 back with you. Not just negative, but also positive. Powerful experience, all right? Now, an important thing to get into is the art of receiving feedback. A lot of people, when they're given feedback, they react. Okay? So if you say to me, Paul, I don't like your shirt, okay? The natural human tendency is to say, what about your shirt? What's your shirt like? Where did you buy it from? How much did it cost? Okay? So some people, the best form of defense is attack, and they begin to attack you back. And we see this happening in a lot of marriages, and then the discussion or the conversation escalates. You don't want to go there. Whenever your spouse gives you feedback, the first thing to do is to say, thank you. Thank you for taking time to make that observation. Thank you. I'm assuming that you're giving me this feedback because we're part of the same team and you want me to grow. You want things to be better. Okay? Psychologically, when you thank them, it helps you not to be defensive and gives you some time not to react. The second thing you do is you seek clarity. This is so important. Whenever someone gives you feedback, seek clarity. If you say to me, Paul, I don't like your shirt. Oh, I'm curious to know, what is it about my shirt you don't like? Is it the color? Is it the style? Is it the texture? And then you'll probably say, oh, no, Paul, it's nothing to do with the shirt itself. It's just that we said we would be smart casual today, but you're wearing a formal shirt. Oh, okay, I see. See, very often when people give feedback, you almost have to mentor them into how to do so non-judgmentally, right? And often we do it when we seeking clarity, because people then talk better, if you know what I mean. So it's important when it comes to feedback. I want to firstly say this. You must understand the relationship between identity and feedback. If someone comes from a background of brokenness and wounding, very often their identity is in their performance. So you can say to your spouse, oh, honey, you know what? This would be nicer if you just cooked it a bit longer. And some people are like, oh, okay, thanks for the feedback. Other people are like, does he think I'm a bad wife? I failed as a wife, or I failed as a husband because he thinks I'm a terrible cook. See, a lot of times people feel hurt because the feedback becomes pervasive. The feedback was just on a very specific issue. I think you should cook it for longer. But you took it as, I'm a bad cook, and then, oh, I'm a terrible wife, or I'm a terrible husband, okay? Make sure that your identity is not enmeshed in the action, okay? They didn't say you're a bad person. They're talking about the item itself, the action. The other thing is, try to move quickly through the 5 stages in landing feedback. This is so important. So feedback has to be landed in you. But very often we've got blockers. Here are the stages of landing feedback. The first one is denial. And I always say denial does not belong here. Denial is a long river in Egypt. Sometimes your spouse gives you feedback. Are you at that stage where you just get stuck on denial? It can't be me. Often we're in denial because it goes against our self-concept. Some of us are very conceited. So we've got a higher estimation of ourselves than we ought. Okay? Oh, she's saying this about me. Just humble yourself. Be broken. Be broken before the Lord, understanding that, you know what? I also mess up. I'm not a perfect father. Right? The second stage is anger. Sometimes we react angrily when we receive feedback. And we react in anger sometimes because we're angry with ourselves, not just with our spouse. Other times we're angry with them and we begin to shoot the messenger. But a lot of times it stems from our own insecurities. We feel rejected. A big source of anger is the anticipation of rejection. Okay? Then we go into the stage of rationalizing it. You know those people who will say, yeah, what you're saying is true, but you must understand I haven't been feeling well. But there are many people who weren't feeling well who didn't do that, what you did. Okay? It's got nothing to do with the fact that you weren't feeling well. Right? Yeah, but you must understand, because I've got kids, those guys don't have kids, but because I've got kids and so on. Sometimes we rationalize certain behavior, and as a result of it, we don't actually land the feedback within us. Other times, it's to do with acceptance. We accept the feedback, but we never change our behavior. Those people will say, yeah. Then they say, I'm sorry, just to close off the conversation because it's getting uncomfortable. Yeah, my dad always used to tell me that. Yes, my siblings also used to tell me that. Yeah. But there's never any change that happens, okay? And the other person thinks, cool, they've got it because they've agreed with me and we didn't fight, but they don't change. So where you want to go in landing feedback is new learning and changed behavior. New learning and changed behavior. You see, what is learning? By definition, learning is the acquisition of knowledge with a resultant attitudinal and behavioral change. Okay? That's when learning has really landed. And the acronym I use for this is DARAN. Right? Denial, anger, rationalization, acceptance, and then new learning. And I want to ask you to just reflect on this and say to yourself, where am I at when it comes to landing feedback? Do I get stuck in denial? Do I get stuck in the anger stage? And what do I need to do to push quickly through that? Have a conversation with your spouse around this. I think it's so important that we're able to receive feedback from our spouses. They're the ones who actually see us at our worst, right? And we need their feedback. Otherwise, we rob ourselves from so much growth that we can actually experience, right? The third principle I want to share with you around receiving feedback is learn the art of receiving correction and feedback, okay? See it as a gift, right? Sometimes it's good to even be proactive about it, to actually look for it, to say, my love, what can I do? What can I work on? Sometimes I have conversations with my wife where we sit down and she might say, what do you need more of from me? And I might say, oh, I need this, and this, right? And then maybe it's my turn. Oh, what do you need more of from me? And then she can say, okay? Create a culture that values feedback. This is so important. So try to see feedback as something positive, crucial, okay? So that when you think of getting feedback from your spouse, you don't see it as they're nagging, but you actually see it as, this is an opportunity for me to discover more about their needs, their wants, and the things that trigger them, the things that push their buttons. And it's an opportunity for me to actually change. Okay? Understand the factors that are influencing the outcome of feedback. This is so crucial. What are some of the factors that influence the outcome of feedback? Emotional reactions. If you give feedback to someone and they react emotionally, well, they're robbing themselves of the opportunity to actually grow. Inadequate explanation. Sometimes we just say something, but we don't fully explain where we're coming from. Use those models because they help you to adequately explain it. Okay? And again, try to craft it beforehand. It helps a lot. And by crafting, I mean writing it out. Okay? Then you say to your spouse, I want to just D4 you. One organization I taught this, they would actually use these as verbs. I just need to SBI a few people today. Okay? Overemphasis on the negative. If you're that person who only spots things when things are going wrong, just be careful of that. Try to catch someone when they're doing the right thing. I was challenging some people from this engineering company some time back. It was Murray and Roberts at the time. And I said to them, you engineers, you're just like auditors. You've been trained to spot the blips, all right? And it makes you a good auditor. It makes you a good engineer. But when it comes to managing people and when it comes to spousal relationships, it's not always great because you'll only talk and comment when something has gone wrong. You only have one-on-ones with your subordinates when there's a problem. Oh, there are no problems today? We don't need to meet. We only meet when it comes to problems because I'm a fixer. And I said to them, I want you to start a new practice. When you're preparing to go to work every day, I would like you to say, today I want to catch someone doing the right thing. And when you see them doing the right thing, I would like you to celebrate it. I'd like you to actually celebrate it. Why? People will always gravitate to where they're celebrated, not where they're tolerated. Okay? Let's try not to overemphasize on the negative. In fact, when you catch them doing the right thing, even if it's just a few times that they're doing that right thing, celebrate it. You'll see them replicating the behavior. So powerful when we understand this. In my needs conversation, I talk about that, okay? Honey, a need I have in this marriage is the need to feel admired by my wife. When you quote me when you're teaching or preaching, that need is met. When you update your parents about some of my accomplishments, that need is met, okay? When you ask for my advice and you choose to pick my brain concerning important matters, that need is met. What am I doing? I'm giving positive feedback on behavior that I need in the marriage. And guess what my wife is going to do? Even if she was just doing it a little bit, it's going to replicate that behavior. Very important. Okay? Instead of trying to catch people only when they're doing the opposite. Lack of participation. Sometimes when feedback is just one way and there's no pause and check, then it can be a bit of a problem. Now, there's some people who will interrupt, interject, and the conversation then doesn't go down well. So in those cases, it's important to say, I need to SBI you, but I just want to say, can you give me a chance to go full circle? And then I'll give you a chance to comment, okay? It just makes the communication more clear. The amount, right? Give feedback on one thing at a time. When you bring in too many issues, and my wife has covered this earlier on, but when you bring in unrelated issues into a conversation, you end up having a problem. Put the other things into the parking lot or into a separate SBI or separate NVC, a separate clean talk, okay? But when you lump too many things together, people get confused. The timing, right? If your spouse is extremely stressed out, they're in the middle of cooking and doing kids' homework, don't just come up with something and just drop a bombshell there, all right? It might not be the best time. You might find that if you've got a good place where you can have their undivided attention and then you have the conversation, you might find it to be a bit better. But also don't use that as an excuse for procrastinating a difficult conversation. The style. It's very important. That's why some people say, I don't mind feedback. It's just the way he does it. It's just the way she does it. Okay? Again, remain calm and try to use the models that I've shared with you. Okay? It's important to offer a positive alternative. And that's why the do at the end is important when you're giving feedback. Otherwise, people just feel like, okay, you've told me this, but what do you want me to do about it? Okay? Sometimes the do can be a bit patronizing, so we have to be careful about that. That's why it's great when the do can also be a conversation. Hey, what should we do about this? What's the way forward? This is my take. Sometimes people struggle to receive feedback because they don't trust your motives. If you come across as superior, if you come across as, I think I'm really good at this type of thing and you're not good, then they question your motives and they don't receive the feedback. That's why sometimes it's good to humble yourself as you relate to your spouse and maybe speak a bit like this where you say, honey, I know I do the same thing so often also, and it's something I'm working on. And then you share. You're showing that, hey, I've also got the same issue, you know. Remember what Jesus said, why do you try to pull out the speck in your brother's eye when you yourself have still got a beam in your own eye? First get the beam out of your own eye, and then you'll be able to see clearly to pick out the speck in his eye. So important. A lot of times when I say to myself, I want to give feedback to my wife on something, I like to use that as a code. So just check. And every single time, the thing I'm about to correct her on, I've also done the same thing. Okay? So always check in on yourself. It affects how you then speak to someone else. Trust is a biggie. There are times when you have to even say, you know what, I think it's better someone else gives this person this feedback. You know, let's go for counseling. They'll hear it from this person, maybe not from me. And that's what happens when the trust levels are not that high. And sometimes we have to be honest with ourselves in terms of where the trust levels are in a marriage situation. I want to encourage you to apply these principles to really love each other through communicating with clarity, to apply the principle of love and respect, to apply the guidelines that we have shared with you and the models for giving feedback. And I believe that your marriage will go from good to great. God bless you.